Viewer discretion is advised. Your fave will be criticized.
That's Jan.
That's her.
And welcome to CCTV, the nonstop pop show.
And today we're having a deep discussion about mental health in the music industry.
Yes, if you're wondering who we are, Shan and I have a huge range of experience in the music industry, from performing on stage to working at record labels. So we have a lot of insight into the crazy music industry. And you can now come join us on Patreon at patreon.com/CCTV Pops. And a big shout out to our crew members, Lisette, Lily, and Emily. Thank you for the support.
Yes, thank you. Before we get started, I would like to issue a trigger warning. The subjects featured on this episode may be triggering for some viewers and listeners. Topics such as eating disorders, substance abuse, depression, sexual trauma, abuse, and suicide will be discussed. Viewer discretion is advised.
All right, so today we are joined by a very special guest, mental health professional, Juliette Blank. Hello, Juliette.
Hi.
Welcome to CCTV. We are so excited to have you here with us. And
Thank you for having me.
how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a big fan of your podcast. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. And Juliette is a really great friend of mine. We actually started in the music industry together. It was our very first job at one of the biggest talent agencies in the world, where we started at the bottom and had to do some questionable things for some of today's top stars. So we've gone through a lot together, and we've stayed friends and watched each other grow into awesome people. So very happy to have you here today. So you did start off working in the music industry, but you have left it as well. So what are you up to now?
Yeah. So I am a licensed mental health therapist now. So I started in the industry, in the entertainment industry, and then realized it kind of wasn't aligned with my values and where I wanted to go. So I went back to school, became a licensed therapist, and now I'm licensed in California and Washington and seeing clients in those states.
Wow, that's awesome. So how was your experience at the talent agency before you made your big switch? And was it different from what you expected?
Yeah. So the talent agency, I was really excited to um, get accepted. I first got in on an internship right when I graduated from college. And then I got hired full time, and I kind of made my way up. I was getting promoted within the agency. All the regular steps that there's like a whole order of things
Mhm.
when you're in an agency. Like you start here, then you go here, then here. It's like very rigid in those steps. But I was so excited to be a part of it because I love the entertainment world. I was a performer myself growing up, a singer, a dancer. And performing was actually, I felt it was too hard on me personally. I went through my own mental health struggles going through as a performer. So I thought, okay, what can I do if I'm not going to be a performer? I still love the industry, so maybe I'll be on the business side of it. And then I got into the top agency at that time, and I think it still is, but
Yeah.
at that time it was the number one agency. So up there. And I was so excited. I was meeting celebrities. I was,
Right.
I was starstruck by it when I first started.
Right.
Um, and I saw this, fabulous world ahead of me. I was like, I'm going to be this high powered agent and
Yeah.
just like an entourage. And just, I had all these dreams and ambitions. But, as I was there, I was disappointed by a lot too. There was, just the way I think some people were treated. It was very much an industry where they cared about just making money and getting the deals done, more than just the human behind who was working on those deals.
Right.
There were really hardworking assistants, people in the mailroom, people in reception in those like lower levels who were doing a lot of the work that the agents would then just kind of, agents would do work and work with them too. But I think a lot of the time, like when I was in an assistant role, I was doing a lot of the work that my agents would then take and they would present it in the meetings. And but then we weren't treated as well as
Mhm.
assistants. So yeah, there's a lot to be said there.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we started kind of at the bottom together. I was in mailroom, you were in reception, And
Yes.
for me, so I kind of started Revolution because I did not go through the steps of promotion. I was one of the
Mhm.
first people to not wait. I was fed up by it and I was like, I'm not doing this. And I quit less than a year in.
Understandably
Um,
so.
and yeah, for me, it felt like first, it felt like it was a weeding out kind of situation. They kind of put you through the worst stuff, the stupidest tasks to see if you would do it
Right.
and see how you would handle it and see if you were willing to do it essentially.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I wasn't going to take that.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was like, what was the point of going to college if I'm changing printer cartridges and cleaning up meeting rooms and picking up cupcakes for celebrities
Right.
when they need a cupcake from across the city? Like,
Right.
it's just
No,
absolutely ridiculous. So, was there kind of a big main turning point for you where you were kind of like, I can't do this anymore, a last straw, or was it more just a gradual realization for you?
I think it was gradual realization because I
Mhm.
think, going into it, it's exactly what you're talking about, where it was kind of like a hazing process. Like you have to prove yourself that you can get through these ridiculous things. You can get through the abuse of like how people talk to you, how people treat you. People step over your toes to get the promotions.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's kind of like you have to have a strategy to make it to the top. And it was kind of like that in the performance world too, where you
Mhm.
don't learn. Like I felt like I never really learned what my values and my boundaries were in that. I was just like, well, I just want to make it. I just want to have success. I just want to be, I was kind of like a people pleaser in a sense where I just wanted to be like approved of
Yeah.
and I wanted to prove myself. So I just went through it and I was like, okay, well, this is the process. Well, I'm going to prove myself and I'm going to rise above it. But then I saw people really getting hurt as well, where,
Mhm.
I think w- one thing that I'll say, and like, I don't have to go so much into it, but I feel like there was racism going on. I
Mm.
feel like there was, because I saw a lot of like, I'm a white female who got promoted easily. And a lot of my friends were people of color that were not getting promoted very easily, and they were just kind of kept at the bottom of the totem pole.
Mhm.
And then when it was those kinds of things and treated a little differently, and then when those things were brought to HR was pretty dismissive of it. Um, so there were like really big things like that. It was also before the Me Too movement, and I
Mhm.
definitely knew some stories, heard some things. Also, some of the people who have already been outed in Hollywood, we had connections with, that I would just hear and see how those big power people were treating their assistants and treating people in the industry where there's definitely like sexual harassment, sexual assault going on. Um, then when I was an assistant, I felt my whole team, there were a couple people who were nice and welcoming to bringing me on, but most of the people on my team were not welcoming to me. They didn't even like my first few weeks there. They didn't even try to get to know me. They didn't
Mhm.
even want to know my name. Um, I also had one boss who was very paranoid of me. Like she thought that when I would go to lunch with a friend in the industry, um, I heard things that she would say to other people where she was like, "Ugh, Juliette is talking with those people again. I bet you she's talking about this and this and this."
Mhm.
And I felt that she was always like watching me like a hawk in a certain way. Um, so I just it didn't feel like an emotionally safe and comfortable environment for me. I witnessed agents throwing things at their assistants,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
hitting them in the head with things. I witnessed them just calling them horrible, demeaning names. One person that I sat next to, um, for the whole year that we were sitting next to each other, they did not eat. Like, I did not see them eat. I don't think that they were sleeping because they were the first ones there. They were the last ones to leave. And I knew
Mhm.
that they were doing a bunch of things after hours too. Um, and I saw them like lose a tremendous amount of weight where I just was like, this isn't a good thing. This is really concerning. Um, so it was stuff like that where I was just like, this is not okay.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess the last thing I'll say about that is I did go to HR at one point,
Mhm.
when I was at the assistant level, and I said, "Hey, like these people on my team have not been nice to me. They've been really rude. They've been like these were higher level agents that were giving me work to do, and I thought I'd open up to HR, and I said, like I'm doing this work for them, and I'm trying my best, but I just they're not treating me well. And they say this to me and that to me. And I was like telling them what was going on. And the HR person at that time was like, well, I heard they're difficult. So you're going to have to learn to work that out.
Right. I worked for a smaller company doing like syncing. I'll say that more sync licensing things, and we didn't have HR. If something was wrong, it was like we just talk about it and we'd leave it alone because there was no one to really have our back. And we thought, oh, this is awesome because it's small, might be a little bit, the barrier of entry might be a lot less difficult, but it was opposite almost. They had artists on their roster who was writing for them who've gotten huge placements, mind you, and they would constantly verbally abuse these women. Um, but then give the guys hey, yeah, I got this opportunity for you. Get them signed to this, get them writing for this person, this artist, but then talk crap about the women. Like they'll record a whole song, whole demo and be like, yeah, we're not releasing that. She's this body, she's that. Oh, yeah, she's not going to make it.
Ugh.
And I watched
Yeah.
this one singer I'm very close to, she wrote years after year after year, just good songs. And she was constantly told no. And I was even in one of her like videos, like way back in the day, and it was never released. All this money was spent on it, all to be said, actually, this is not it. So it was very weird. And for me, I got brought in for like a streaming sites syncing thing, and the director was there. And I was told to come in. And I thought, oh, this is my chance to get some input. They wanted me in there because I was cute. And I'm thinking to myself, so as the executive producer, you didn't think to say, no, I'm not going to bring her in for that, man. So the defense is just not there. You don't feel safe, especially as a young woman.
No.
And then my final straw was like, oh, I think a lot of people don't realize, why do you stay so long? Because you're thinking, oh, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. You kind of like minimize it. And the last straw for me was when I got offered an opportunity to work for them, but it ended up being, oh, this is a test. Mind you, I had interned for them 2 years prior. So for how many weeks I'm going to work coming from Long Island, that's $40 a day to not get paid because I'm being tested. I never went back. So for me, I was like, I'm done. He took less than a year and realized, yeah, I'm not doing this. What was your last strong moment when you realized that you wanted to pivot into mental health?
Yeah. So I think it was shortly after that HR meeting where I was like, they're totally dismissing me and I'm kind of on my own here. And also most of my friends left, like Chris left and
Yes.
and I was still there. And I had like a few other like really close best friends there. So that's one thing. I made amazing friends there. So I did have some amazing experiences in that way where we all like started together and went through this together.
Yeah.
But I had a few other friends who also were just fed up and left. So yeah, I was there probably 2 years. And once I was seeing that, and then I started looking at like what I can do instead. I had kind of like a quarter life crisis of like, what can I do if not this? And I started looking at school programs for becoming a therapist. And I was like, you know what? This sounds like it feels like it aligns. So
Right.
I saw what those opportunities were and then I left.
That's awesome.
Yes, and I was so happy for you when you did. Oh man. Yeah, I think for me, like it was also the competitiveness too was ingrained in the work. They wanted you to be competitive with each other. Like the whole thing
Yes.
with mailroom and reception, we were all competing to be promoted to be assistants. Like
That TV show.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was just like there was an inherent distrust among everyone because it's like you said, there was this paranoia that like, what are you doing for that agent that I'm not doing? Like, what are you doing that looks better than what I'm doing? And then everyone would be trying to like suck up to HR because they were the ones who would
Yes.
make the recommendations at the time. So just the whole environment was so bad. Like, and I'm not inherently a very competitive person. And I think the music industry in general is quite competitive. Never got to as bad as it was at that agency, but I felt that at the label and stuff too. There
Right.
was always kind of like I want to make it to the top and you're in my way.
Great.
Yeah, I'm not
and-
competitive either, actually.
Yeah, and that's both, and unfortunately, that's there both behind the scenes and
yeah.
for talent as well. Like people compete on the charts, people compete for placements, people compete for awards.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just
Yeah.
inherent in the industry, which is really
It's weird.
sad.
And no one's thought, hey, I went through this as a younger person. Why would I want to sit there and do this to more people and have like this whole like what like
Mm.
dynasty or like what descendants of stress, descendants of competitiveness. Like, I just don't get it. Like, why
Yeah.
keep fostering the environment? I mean, it's hard to kind of work in and then pull it out. But like when you're at a top position, why would you want to have that environment? Even if you catch wind of it, nip it in the bud, but it doesn't really happen as often. Like I said, I was in a small company and they were like, it was because you're cute.
Mm.
Okay. A
right?
dom's
It's like
cute.
normalized.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
normalized and it's exactly what you're saying. Like the people at the top were not saying anything or doing anything. And some of them just kind of came in at the top, like if they were doing other jobs that
Mhm.
maybe they worked their way up in and then they were hired at the top as agents. But a lot of them did go through the system too.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a badge of honor. Like I went through this, I went through the hazing, so
Right.
you have to go through it too. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. And also, I just want to note for
Um,
anyone listening to this, we also made no
Oh
money.
my God.
It was not a
oh
livable
yeah.
salary. And for those that
No.
don't
And if
know,
you're
like, yeah, and
Yeah.
then when you get promoted to assistant, you make even
Less
less
money.
money. It was just like when I look back at that and I talk to people about their starting salaries, I was like, how did we survive? Like, I
Right.
cannot believe.
no.
It was different.
Yeah, the whole entertainment industry, it's so bad because people still see it as such a glamorous job
Yeah.
that there's so
Yeah.
much like people can replace you in a second.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And so they don't need to pay you that much because they can just find someone that will want to do it for that tiny amount of money. So just FYI for all
Right.
those people listening,
Yes.
it is not glamorous and you also make no money until you make it to the top. So
Oh my God. Yes.
No money.
yeah.
Yeah.
Domestically,
I mean,
internationally speaking, yeah. None whatsoever. Like,
right. All my friends were struggling. I was lucky where I lived. Well, I lived with my parents at the time, but I did not want to be living with my family forever. But I was
right.
lucky in that way that I had that. But all my other friends, I was like, how the hell are you like how are you
Mm-mm.
paying for an apartment in New York City?
Hang on. Hello. Hello.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
right? We just talking about
Yeah.
that.
Oh man.
Yeah.
All right. So now that you are on the outside looking in on the music industry,
Yeah.
and now that you can kind of observe both kind of people who work in it behind the scenes and kind of the big pop stars that are there right now, what do you think are some of the
Yeah.
common concerns that arise for artists and other creators?
Yeah, definitely. I think eating disorders is a big one, especially like in the performer side of things. Um, also, in both sides, I guess, in a lot of ways, because eating disorders, I think, well, that's misunderstood a lot, but eating disorders really comes from trauma. But then there's also just such a focus on what you look like and certain beauty standards in this industry that
Mhm.
can lead to that. Substance use, addictions, depression, anxiety, suicide, sexual trauma, domestic violence, or abusive relationships. I think all of those are really the main things.
Mhm. With that being said, what do you think are some main factors in the current culture that contribute to these factors and these concerns?
Yeah. So in the culture, especially as talent, but then as I saw also on the business side of things,
Mm.
um, you're dehumanized a lot. So it's, the talent is looked at as when you're professional talent in the industry, you're looked at as a commodity to make people money and to entertain and please people. It's not really about who you are as a human being. I saw that also just on the business side too. It wasn't like these human values and how we connect with each other and empathize
Mm.
and all that kind of stuff. That's just erased. It's about like, can you get the deal done? Let's get this deal done. And I think with talent, it just brings a lot of trouble in their, they don't learn to tune into their deeper selves. They don't learn to tune into their deeper needs, emotions. It becomes about what they can do for others. Like, are you making others enough money? Are you making people happy with the talent and your entertainment value? Are you worthy enough of the fame and attention
Mm.
that you're getting? Are you appreciative enough of the fame, money, and attention? So it's like always like, are you enough? Are you good enough?
Mm.
Um, and you don't learn what's beneath that and what your true needs are very easily. Um, and I think with that, there's a push, there's a pressure to push through your true needs a lot of the time just to get the job done. So like if you're feeling sick or under the weather, doesn't matter because like hundreds and thousands of people came to see your show. So like you have to get out there and you have to
Mhm.
just do it. And the show must go on, So
Right.
that saying in show business, the show must go on.
Mhm.
And it's true. Like you have to kind of suppress yourself a lot to just do the job.
Yeah, for sure. Just speaking on that, just as an artist myself, it took me a while to get out of it because I went from dancing in the background. So it was like, hey, we got another dancer. There's a swing for that one. Even in the musical world, there are understudies, there are swings, there is someone that will take your spot if you can't be there. You don't want to like
Right.
not be there. But like when you're the main person, or even if you're in a group, it's kind of like if you're that person who has been maintaining the face of the group, or if you're a solo artist, there is no, well, guys, we got another Juliette, we got another Chris, we got another Shan. Like it's just, where are you? Why didn't you show up? And even with me, I kind of on a very like minor level, I had like imposter syndrome because I was like, oh my God, I can't write a song that was as good as my first one. Like you get wrapped up in that because it's just like, well, what if I don't do something as good? Then it's not going to be as important, and I'm not worthy. Like you said, I'm not worthy of the recognition I've received thus far. It took me a minute to get like that because I think it's tough when you're dealing with something that is so subjectively reviewed, right? Like I can do whatever I want and put the music out, but if they don't like it, I'm not making money. If they do like it, I'm making money. And I think a lot of artists don't realize how to make that disconnect. Like you have to do something that satisfies you. And if it's good and you're doing your best work and you put it out there, people will find it. Right. But a lot of us get in this loop of like, oh my God, I have to do it for the people. I've heard some crazy stuff. I heard trash cans get banged on and they have an audience, right? But a lot of singers don't think like, oh my gosh, as long as I'm doing what I want to do, people will find it. Like you can't control what other people think about you, but you can control what you put out. And that's what it took me a little bit longer than I wanted it to figure that out. But once I did, I felt so much peace. The whole like, I don't have like any type of ED or anything like that, but even as a dancer, you have to fit to the costume. Like you get measured in the springtime. By the time the summer show is out, you better fit into it. Even when you're doing dance shows, if you can't fit the shoe, you don't get the job. So I'm dancing size 7 shoes. I'm a size 10.
Right.
But I wanted the job. I was like, oh, I don't want to just like not dance. Like we can't stop the shoot because I'm not the star. I'm a background dancer. I don't want to lose the gig. We just paid for the space. So there's a lot of hands in the pot. And you're like, oh my God, everyone's hands are out. Not even in the pot. Everyone's hand is out. And you're like, oh, okay, here's a piece of me and another piece and then another piece. And then you forget like, you got to find your inner piece before you give out pieces of your anything to anyone else. Like I said, it took me a little minute to get there. But a lot of artists, even like as they get older, they never learned it. So they stay in it and they fall victim to substance abuse or their traumas, and they don't actually get the help that they need, especially with the artists that we're going to talk about today, for sure.
Yeah. I think also in general, what do you think of like social media and kind of just the general pressure of social society right now? Because I think now normal people in quotes, have also get an idea of this kind of social pressure because there's so much more visibility on how interesting your life is and how you look every single day and kind of the need to present yourself to the world. So what do you kind of think of that aspect of current culture?
Yeah, totally. Everything you just said. And there's the standards on there of like, are you showing enough content or like, I think there's pressure with talent. You have to be engaging with your audience on there. And then, Shan, what you were saying with like are you good enough? Are things going to be good enough in putting it out there? Am I going to have enough likes or followers? Like that all translates to social media too. Instead of just being like, I'm feeling this right now, I want to share it, instead of being like internally, like I feel good with this, I want to share it. It's all like, again, this external validation. And then there's cancel culture too, where it's like, there's no room for you to be a human. And yes, there are some like outrageous things out there that people are going to decide like not to follow and or to follow and kind of make a stand with that with social media, where I think there's some positive stuff in that way. But then some of it is like, there's no room for you to just be a human and to develop and make mistakes. So I especially think like child stars going through it right now. With their social media, they have more people commenting, more people looking at them, more room for scrutiny and rejection in that way. Yeah.
I think that clout chasing is another drug that is not really, can't really medically call it a drug, but it's one of those things. You get that adrenaline, you get that, you get super excited. It's like, oh my God, yes, instant grat.
Yeah. And then the accessibility is also scary because at least I think back then when we were kids, we put these pop stars on a pedestal, and that obviously that has some issues on its own. But now because they're accessible,
Mm-hmm.
then you get all these crazy trolls
In
who
parasocial
can then,
relationships.
Yes.
and some in parasocial relationship. But then, yeah, it's just like you can say all this stuff anonymously.
Yeah.
And
There's no
Mhm.
gatekeeper. There's no
yeah,
gatekeeper to be like, no, you can't talk to the
Right.
artist. No, you can't leave this comment on Blue Ivy
mm-mm,
hair. You cannot do this because it's there. And then people will talk about it. And then more people will talk about why it's being said and why you can't say it. And it just turns into this whole like, what's the word for it? Echo chamber of just like, don't say that. No, say it. Say it. The celebrities are people. They have no right to privacy. They have no right to mental health. Because like you said,
Yeah.
they're a
They're like, oh, well,
commodity.
you're
Yeah.
putting it out there or you're out there for the world to comment on you. So you just got to take it
mm,
kind
Yeah.
of
That's
thing.
weird to me. It's a little
Yeah.
weird. I think it's a little unfair.
People are braver behind a computer and behind us, like
mhm.
typing things
Oh, yeah,
out
for
there than
sure.
they would say to you in person. So, there's definitely more abuse going on the internet.
I mean, when we look at the industry as a whole throughout time, there are instances where mental health challenges have resulted in ridicule and dehumanization from the general public, as we mentioned. And in more extreme cases, some artists have even lost their lives. So, as society has become more informed about mental health, more steps are being taken to treat and heal, but the industry, both for the artists and those behind the scenes, still has much work to do. And the
Yeah.
general public, we can lump that in there too. I feel like
Oh, yeah.
everyone.
Mhm. All right, so let's transition to the next part of the episode. We've chosen a couple specific cases to discuss, kind of bigger artists that
Right.
have gone through very publicly struggles in their mental health. So we're going to start with the princess of pop, or one of the princesses of pop,
Yes.
Britney Spears. Yes. So she was at the forefront of the teen pop craze that started in the late 90s. And with her great fame, Britney encountered a relentless barrage of criticism, from body image to relationships, to which she responded amicably. And after releasing 4 groundbreaking and hugely successful albums, Britney injured herself while on tour, forcing her to take a step back and eventually leading to her marriage, the birth of her kids, and being surrounded by people who didn't have her best interests at heart. So, after being placed in a 13-year conservatorship by her family, Britney is now free and very publicly speaking about her experiences on social media. So, Juliette, we went to Vegas actually to see
Right.
Britney.
Lucky.
Okay.
Yeah, and
That was amazing.
that was amazing. It was an adventure for sure. But it makes me really sad thinking back sometimes, because
Yeah.
hearing now that she's publicly speaking about the residency and how unhappy she was at the time, it's crazy she did it for so long. But both of us have been fans of Britney since we were children. So as a fan of hers, and now as a mental health professional, what are some of your thoughts on her situation as a whole?
Oh, totally. I was the biggest fan. I think her album was the when I was younger, it was the second CD I ever owned.
Mm.
Spice Girls was the first. And then
That's why we're friends.
yes, and then it was Britney. So I,
I guess nice.
worshipped Britney. I
Yeah.
loved her album. I remember, sitting in my room listening to that first album, just, in love with every part of it, and I put her on a pedestal,
Mm.
just what you were saying before. We, idolized these
Mhm.
people, and she could do no wrong. She was, the perfect picture perfect
Yeah.
girl next door. Everyone wanted to be her, everyone to look like her. I grew up, really really looking at that, wanting to be her. And then I was a dancer too, and her dancing, more so, even though, I loved music and I love her singing voice too. I know there's a lot of criticism that people say about that too. But, I'm a fan all around of Britney, but her dancing, especially, I just always wanted to dance like
Mhm.
Britney.
Mhm.
Um, so I look back now and I'm like, wow, there was so much more to the story that
Mm.
I just didn't know. I thought I kind of knew her in a sense, but then there's so much more going on behind the scenes that we didn't know about. And especially with the Vegas residency at that point, all the stories that come out about how controlled she was and how certain things just felt so much like a punishment around her
Mm.
with her mental health. Um, it was really sad to hear about. And one thing I'll say, so with conservatorships, so I've had clients on conservatorships, I'm familiar with conservatorships. And I think that in some cases, it could be warranted. In some cases, it could be really great. Basically, it's meant to be there for someone when they're unable to take care of themselves,
Mhm.
or if they're a danger to themselves or others in some way.
Mhm.
However, this definition is vague, and there hasn't been enough reform or like oversight in the conservatorship world to really see when it goes too far and when it's taking advantage of people. So conservatorship abuse is actually more common than we think. So Brittany coming out about this and this whole thing about her conservatorship and her trying to get out of it, it kind of put it to the forefront where hopefully that can lead to some reform and some change. There's a lot of disability rights activists that have been trying to make reform and change around this for a while. Um, so her story kind of brought this forward, and more people are listening to this. Her going through this, and I think we don't know the whole story. Don't know what happened at the time that really led to this. We don't know her diagnoses or like what mental health things specifically she was going through.
Mm.
So it could very well be that at that time, her family thought that they were doing the best thing for her
Mhm.
and trying to protect her, especially if she had people kind of, in the spotlight. You're being taken advantage a lot.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, they maybe stepped in that kind of way. However, from what we've seen, like in the documentaries and like everything that's been out there, it seems like, something happened in 2007 that kind of led her to act out in some way, or like there was some behavior that was looked at as like not
Mhm.
in character for her. And it was looked at as like erratic and manic. And, there are all kinds of labels going on
Yeah.
about that. Um, and I, part of me thinks it could have been just kind of from all these years of pressures and control and paparazzi after her, that you know, she just let loose, and it was like trauma and kind of having a response in that way. And then there's another side too, because like there has been some talk about her being diagnosed with bipolar disorder and some other things where that stuff can come out in mania. Like,
Yeah.
with bipolar disorder, there's some, you could be more impulsive, have impaired decision making, that kind of stuff. But what I was really upset about from all the documentaries and all that is, from what I know, as much as all the other viewers out there, it doesn't seem like there was a moment of, okay, let's get you help, let's get you support, let's see how you do.
Yeah.
There wasn't like this compassion, empathy, understanding. We're just like, oh boy, she's unhinged. She's off, you
Mhm.
know, off the edge there with her behavior. We got to get her, like, we got to control this. We got to buckle down and make this better. She's going to lose all her fans. She needs to go back to her image. We got to go back to this. So it was kind of like control as a punishment. And then she went through all this like mandated treatment that felt more punishment
Mm.
than people actually there to help her succeed and help her feel better and work through whatever she was going through. So yeah, those are all my initial thoughts on this.
Mhm.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, if your cash cow is not producing what she needs to, you'll do anything to kind of make her do it. And that's what, again, goes back to what you were saying. You're a product and people didn't see. I mean, like back in the day, she got a lot of just verbal abuse in a sense,
Yeah, I mean, the
you
the
know,
press and the public were mean to her from the
completely.
beginning, like, with
Yeah.
Baby One More Time in that schoolgirl outfit,
Hmm.
there was
Oh
already
my
slut
God. Yeah.
shaming going on,
Right.
she was
Yeah.
16,
Right.
like,
Right.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, what do you think of press now? Obviously, paparazzi isn't as invasive now, it still can get a little crazy, but there
Yeah.
are more laws and everything with that, um, but yeah, what do you think? Because for her, I think it was that pressure from the press and kind of all the
Hmm.
negative stuff that was being said about her. And then she also has the family that is depending on
Hmm.
her
Hmm.
to be this presence.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, what do you think of just those two different types of pressure as well?
Yeah. Well, I think also at that time, like I'm just thinking because she grew up like she was a child star, starting out
Hmm.
also in the Disney World, like
Yes.
Mickey Mouse Club, and then she started her first album. She was 16, so
Yeah.
I think she was over sexualized at a young age.
Mhm.
And, there were pressures. She was like looked at as an adult, looked at older than
Hmm.
she was. But she was only 16. So there were a lot of pressures, I think, out there for her to like fit in a box that just didn't really go with her development, like her true needs
Mhm.
and development in that way. Um, and then I saw like she went through different stages where she was like, there was the overprotected song and
Oh
like
yeah.
all those
Yeah.
songs about like being overprotected, where she's like, I'm gonna come out and I'm
Hmm.
gonna show my sexuality with pride, like instead
Yeah.
of other people kind of placing that on her.
Mhm.
And but it still had to be controlled in a sense. It still had to like fit a narrative, fit a box of her, image, her brand image, her public image. And then the stuff with the family, I think also the fact that she started all this fame and success when she was 16, that like
Mm.
creates all these unnatural power dynamics and responsibility dynamics in the household, where
Mhm.
it's normally your 16-year-old is not the one making all the money for your family.
Right.
Mhm.
It's a lot of responsibility to put on a kid.
For sure. For sure. I was before we started this, like we were talking about a lot of things like, survivor's remorse or something like that in a sense where it's just like, well, I made it
Oh,
out.
yeah.
I gotta take care of my family. Cause even I kind of do that because talking about like
Mhm.
Brittany in the Catholic school, I've seen a bunch of Catholic school girls roll up the skirt, tie their shirt. We've all done it. I was a goody goody, so I never did it. And I wore pants. But yeah, I mean, like just growing up watching her, I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's amazing. And my mom was like, but she's such a baby. There's so many young child stars like Aaliyah, Brandy, Monica, like
Yes.
for like a lot of the R&B community, we saw them at 15. They were recording their albums 13, 14, experiencing whatever they were experiencing. Right.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, well, but if I stop, mom can't eat. Dad can't eat. And like this remorse starts to kind of develop. Like even I'm like, oh my God, my parents paid for my dancing education and blah, 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 blah. It's very hard to separate yourself from that, But that also goes back to what you were saying
Right.
about the family dynamic being healthy. My parents are supportive. They're like, don't give it back. That's weird. Don't do that. But a lot of child actors, I mean, Gary Coleman, I mean, you can go about all the child actors from like the 70s even. They had to get emancipated just to be like, listen, my parent is a piece of crap.
Mhm.
I need to like separate myself. And then they end up with nothing and they have to start from scratch. With Britney, she had all that money and they're like, oh, we got you, babe. We got you. And they just kept getting like digging their claws deeper and it just stinks. Do you think that maybe with some of it was like survivor's remorse or maybe it was just like, hey, I've already latched into the situation. It's working. Leave it like that.
Yeah, and then she was getting so much praise for it. Again, it like goes back to
Mm,
that external validation instead of her learning to check in with like I wonder if her family was like, "Brittany, how are you doing? Like,
right.
how are you feeling about this? Are you enjoying this? Are you not?" Like, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of check-ins. It's just the assumption of like, "Oh, you're getting to sing and dance and that makes you happy and
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
you're everyone loves you." Um so yeah, I wonder what she went through with that.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely she came from a small town in Louisiana where
Yeah.
they didn't really have much. So this was a big
Yeah.
deal for her and her family.
Mhm.
Speaking of another former Disney child actor, we're going to jump right into Demi Lovato. After her big break in Camp Rock on the Disney Channel, they quickly rose to fame as one of the most powerhouse vocalists of the late, 2000s. And through the 2010s, the starlet struggled with an eating disorder and self-harm and eventually began taking substances from alcohol and hard drugs. And throughout her usage, Demi would still perform and even claim sobriety. And in documentaries, Demi would also mention that her team would control her food consumption. And throughout these years, though, Demi was extremely unhappy and relapsed unbeknownst to others. And eventually in 2018, she overdosed. I think it's very publicized at this point. And although her physical health has taken permanent damage, her mental health is on the mend and she has continued to be vocal about her experiences. So unlike Britney, she started to come out a little bit more like, hey, this happened. She has all these documentaries on YouTube. Even her most recent album has 29, where she's talking about how her former romance with Wilmer
Mhm.
Valderrama was a little bit more nefarious in nature than she had actually noticed. I mean, I think a lot of Disney stars are talking about the seediness of their experiences. I think she even mentioned getting essayed at one point while she was, still acting. And like Britney, she started as an entertainer very early in her life and went through the Disney pipeline. So, what do you think of kids starting so early, and how does it affect their mental health as they get older? Because for me, I've heard like once you've made it at a certain age, like it's like a almost like a wives' tale. You've made it at the certain age, you stop at that age. You kind of like mentally, like,
Oh,
oh yeah, like, hey, you've made it at like 12 or something. Yeah, you'll go grow up, but like there's certain things you don't learn, certain things you don't really like. I
Well,
don't have to be. I'm an adult now, like Justin Bieber made it when he was like 12. he kind of struggled with being kind of childlike. Michael made it at what, 8 and never let go of his childlike tendencies, right? So what do you think about that as a whole with child stars?
Yeah. So what we kind of already talked about with Brittany is, a lot of them are put in that position to hold a lot of responsibility at a young age. So a lot of them are supporting their families and, kind of are the breadwinners in the family in that way, which we talked about. And then just being like, on set or in the studio, they're working. So this
Mhm.
is instead of just being at school and being kind of a learner and someone who takes in information and kind of goes through that process, they're there, expected to do a job just like adults. So that is, they're treated like adults in those situations. I even, I'm just thinking back also because even though I wasn't like a child star, I was a
Mhm.
child performer,
Right.
and I grew up in New York where I would go to Broadway auditions and I did a lot kind of in New York City and I would miss school sometimes for performance opportunities. And I wanted to be a Disney star. I wanted to be on there. But I just remember like in my rehearsals, even with my directors that were, just local directors,
Mhm.
they talked to us like adults. They treated us like adults. And some of it was really harsh and really, not acceptable to be
Mhm.
talking to a child in that kind of way.
Mhm.
So and they made comments on your body. They made comments on so many things that like body image is a learned thing.
Mhm.
So you learn to have a relationship with yourself, your self-esteem and body image. You learn with time how to have a relationship with yourself and with your body. So when you're in these environments where they're talking to you about like the whole package of needing to work on things for yourself and talking to you as if you're an adult and you're just going to take it and
Mhm.
like take it, yeah, just take that note and work on it and come back the next
Mhm.
day showing that you've worked on it.
Right.
Um, just like in a job, it's really hard on a youngster.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, Mel C from the Spice Girls, she just released her autobiography, and she got into that as well. She was also a dancer as a
Mhm.
child, and she also got into kind of the whole aspect of she she didn't know that she had to really look at her legs and
Yeah.
analyze how skinny they were, and an older
Mhm.
man telling her that her thighs were big,
Mhm.
that was a lifelong impact, and that ended up snowballing into years of issues for her. So yeah, it's
Mhm.
really quite sad kind of
Yeah.
how the industry
Yes.
starts so young treating kids that way,
Yeah.
without any
Yeah.
real realization of how it can affect
Not at all.
you.
Or
Yeah.
like supplying them with proper resources. Like for me, like when I teach dance, I'm like, okay, listen, I guys, I'm like, hold your core. It doesn't mean you're not. No, it doesn't mean you're not exercising. It means just internally, like make sure you're like solid. I clarify what I mean. You don't need
Mhm.
abs to
Mhm.
hold your core. Just hold it, tighten it,
Right.
tighten. You can make it very clear. And a lot of studios don't do that. I've been fortunate enough not to have that crazy system. But I mean,
Mhm.
even going back to Demi, like she had to be like this kind of skinny rocker chick, and she's not built for that. But she's a Mexican American young woman,
Yeah.
they, them. You know what I'm saying? She's got curves. The older she got, like she got curvier, and then her weight started fluctuating. And then, of course, with the usage of drugs and substances, it was up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And then, like the self
Yeah.
harm and stuff like that, she
Mhm.
was just never right. And then I think she even had bulimia, right? If I'm not mistaken, and it was
Mhm.
messing with her
Yeah.
vocal cords. So it turns into this thing where it's like it's not just your body; it's affecting your craft, it's affecting what you do as a performer, which goes back into, oh my gosh, I have to feed people. It's like this constant like
Mhm.
uphill
On a
battle for
hamster
sure.
wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's crazy, and then even with
Trying to
her
keep up.
oh, yeah, exactly, you're always just like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, but this is stressing me out. I'm not gonna eat. Oh, but I need to eat. But if I don't eat, oh, but if I eat, I'll get" it's just so much. It's the weirdest thing, but we just can't get out of it sometimes. And,
Yeah.
even with her drug use, she has had issues stopping. Like, somehow have an eating disorder, like Janet has mentioned when she was stressed, she didn't talk about it. She's a very quiet person. She would eat. With Demi, when I'm stressed, when I'm feeling like X, Y, and Z, I would self-harm, and then the self-harm developed into drugs and
Mhm.
then harder drugs. I think she had
Mhm.
mentioned, I think in an interview for her YouTube series that she didn't want to get sober. She wasn't ready for it. And that's huge. That's key. You have to want it. everyone around you could be like, hey, listen, eat this salad, it's good for you. And she's like, I don't want it. I don't want it. So it feels more like you're being force fed things and like, you can't eat that. Don't have too much of that. You can't, don't do that. So it's just like, what can I control? Oh, I can control
Mm.
the substance. I
Yeah.
can have that, So
Mm.
it's so crazy. What do you think about her statements, her saying, I wasn't ready to get sober?
Yeah. So, right, what you said, you were like, I need something to control. And I think just with saying one comment back with the child star stuff, well, children, young adults, they're very impressionable, very vulnerable to influence around them. And if no one is teaching them how to regulate their emotions or how to check in with themselves, like we were saying, like how to do that internal check rather than just looking at the external validation and the pressures that they're just trying to keep up with. If no one's teaching that, then they're going to turn to things to try to keep up with the pressures and try to like regulate what's going on inside them. Like if they're dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression, if they're dealing with just, so much stress and pressure, that's where addictions, substance use, eating disorders, that's where that really comes in.
Mm.
So, when people are then in the recovery process telling you, you just need to stop and just saying like, it's bad you're doing this, and they try to take it away from you, then you're left with like, what do I turn to cope with? What do I turn to help me through this? Like that was like, in a way, those things help them survive. Those things help them through. So we have to recognize that. And then we can't control their process even further in the
Mm.
recovery. So Demi Lovato, she talks about, and I think they go by they pronoun, they, them, and she, her now. So I'll go between both of them. I don't want to misgender. Um, so they went through, you know, with their eating disorder, I'll say they've spoke very freely about this. They've spoken out about this recently, that their management was very controlling about the eating disorder recovery. And this was not in eating disorder recovery, especially, you have to learn to have a good relationship with food in your body again. So it's kind of counterintuitive to just be like, you're only allowed to eat it. Again, it's like external stuff coming in instead of you learning that internal process for your body.
Mhm.
So she felt, again, very controlled by her management with that, which just leads to relapse and leads to her not being ready.
Yes.
So Demi was not ready because they were still holding on to something that they can control, and they can, that no one was going to like micromanage and be on
Yeah.
top of them for. And same with the substances. There's actually different ways of recovery in
Mm.
addiction and substance use recovery. It's not only the 12-step, like go to AA meetings and get completely sober. There's actually another side of harm reduction where it's really meeting the client, where when I'm working with a client, it's meeting the client where they're at, making goals where their substance use is going to be safer, or we're going to take kind of steps for them in where they're at with that. Because depending on different things, going like cold turkey to complete abstinence,
Yeah.
that's really hard. So I think Demi had to figure this out. At first, they were kind of forced in that direction.
Mm.
And then they've allowed themselves, since the overdose, since the
Mm.
relapse, to, look back and say, okay, what do I actually need? And I've worked with therapists around that. So they went into this California sober zone. They have a song called California Sober.
Yeah.
And that's about this harm reduction approach,
Right.
where
Nice.
they were off certain drugs, but other ones they're learning to use in moderation, like marijuana and alcohol, and kind of just taking steps to where they're ready. But then I
Mhm.
think now they're back to being completely sober. So they had to go through that
Mm.
Yeah.
their own process for that. Yeah.
The next and last case on our episode today is an international artist by the name of Jonghyun. Um,
Mhm.
just to kind of just preface this really quickly, he is someone who has unfortunately did reach out for help and didn't receive the kind of help necessary for his situation. So as a member of a 5-piece K-pop boy band Shiny, known for impressive vocals and intricate choreography, Junghyun was its lead vocalist and found huge success as a solo artist and a songwriter. And during his time with the group, he received accolades for his artistic control and involvement in creative process, which is very rare in K-pop. And as an influential young man in the pop industry, he was encouraged, like many others, to keep his personal life and opinion separate and private. But even so, Jonghyun would sometimes show subtle signs of support for challenging the status quo and depict his inner thoughts through his lyrics. And though there were brief moments of vulnerability and even discreet mentions of feeling pressure and sadness through his lyrics, Jonghyun never explicitly expressed the severity of his depression. And in 2017, after releasing 5 group albums and 2 solo releases, essentially being on top of the world, Jonghyun did end his own life. And his death shook the industry, but it did open the eyes of many to the silent struggles that idols face, especially in that region of the world. And since then, the conversation around mental health has become more welcome, with newer K-pop artists readily expressing the need for a mental health break. And we will link the letter to the letter. We'll leave a link to the letter in a description box if this letter does help people, because it was something that I read as an artist myself, and I was like, oh my God, oh my gosh, I felt this. I felt it on such a, just tell me I did good, right? So from reading Junghyun's letter, it seemed that he was accused by the mental health professionals as not having serious enough issues. So he's minimalized essentially. And he has stated that the life of fame was not meant for him, which is interesting considering how talented he was and how much work he had done. What do you think about this whole situation?
Yeah. I don't know much about like where he got his mental health treatment
Mm,
and, what really went on there. But I would say just, as a therapist, I would say that having suicidal thoughts is very common. It's more common than we think. It doesn't mean that everyone with suicidal thoughts, it's going to lead to suicide. Cause I think, there's certain steps in between that leads to actually following through with that, the progression there. But it's more common than we think to have the thought.
mm,
Mm.
Um, so I deal with it all the time with clients. And I think, as a therapist, you are trained around this. You are trained to normalize this and to really hear, hear where they're at and try to prevent it from, creating safety plans and working on things together to prevent it from moving into them ending up taking their lives and acting on it. But you want to make sure it's a safe space that they aren't feeling like it's too much to talk about it, that they're having the thoughts that, you know, this can be talked about and it makes a lot of sense given what they're going through. A lot of the time, people are just wanting to escape their pain, their emotional pain, their physical pain, whatever pain that they're in. It's usually something that they're dealing with daily or just a large amount of pain and they're not knowing what to do around it, where it gets exhausting to cope with it and exhausting to deal with it, that they just want to escape. They just want to get out of there. It's not so much that they really do want to end their lives. It's sometimes just really wanting to escape that pain. It's so debilitating for them.
mm,
So having a space for them, even if you're a friend or a family member, you want to have a non-judgmental space for people. Um, to talk about this and not act relieved if they're like, not act relieved
right.
if they're like, no, I'm not thinking about it
Mm.
or it's not that serious. Like you
Yeah.
want to take it seriously. So it sounds like whoever he did talk about it with were kind of in their own denial or didn't really want to face the reality of that. And maybe the mental health provider also was kind of dealing with their own stuff around it where it was dismissed or like, okay, good. It's not that serious. Don't. That's good to hear. Maybe that stuff was going on.
Mm.
Um, we don't want to do that. We want to say, okay, well, if it does get serious, I'm here for you. If because people may downplay it and dismiss it at first too, because
Mm,
they want to test if it's safe to tell you or safe to talk about.
mm.
So you want to show them it's safe to talk about. And if this is really what you're experiencing, that's okay. And I'm here for you. I'm here to help you through that.
Mhm. So for me, it was he was my favorite member of Shiny, and this really hit me
Yeah.
very hard when it happened. And I think it was very unfortunate because in interviews and in some of his songs as well, it was very poignant. It was very obvious that he was going through
Yeah.
something. And especially, I mean, I think this is the case for all artists, but and now people with social media, but especially in kind of this idol industry in K-pop, the whole idea is that you become this idol, you
Yeah.
become this
Mhm.
character. And sometimes you're even given the personality,
Mhm.
given the role that you play in the group,
Yeah.
and you can't really share who you are. Like in interviews, you're told you're supposed to play this character,
Right. You're the
essentially.
yeah.
And there are clips of older interviews of him where he is kind of like, yeah, like I feel like the fans even care about the real me
Yeah.
and kind of that aspect
Yeah.
of it. So what jumped out to you when reading his letter and going through some of the lyrics?
Yeah. So I read his letter and yeah, I was introduced to him by you. I'm not very familiar with all the artists in the K-pop world. And I just have to say, he was an amazing vocalist and I think known as one of the best
Hmm.
vocalists out there, and he was, yeah, his music was amazing. Shiny's music was amazing. So I loved kind of listening through. And what I saw there was an interview that he said, I thought people don't want to know who I really am.
Mm.
Hmm.
So he was saying, like, people don't know the real me. I don't think people want to know the real me. And then I saw with one of his songs, the Let Me Out song, said, someone, and this was the English translation, but someone noticed me and my struggle. I am exhausted from this world.
Mm.
Help me. Don't foolishly hold on. Just let me go. Um, and
Yeah.
then in Elevator, he says, you don't know me. So these were just some examples that I picked up on
Hmm.
where these are big signs that he really was feeling kind of like maybe like a fraud in the role that he was supposed to play, or that he couldn't really let out who he was. He couldn't really be who he was. And maybe that's why he was saying fame wasn't for me. It's just so much pressure, so much expectation. And then it also shows that he was exhausted. Like in the letter, he says, I am exhausted. I never learned how to turn this exhausting pain into bliss. So again, like I said, being exhausted from the pain, wanting to escape that, he talks about that a lot in his letter, in his interviews, and in those songs.
Hmm.
What is some way that you could, I guess, let someone know that you're there? Aside from the things that you mentioned, what else can you say to someone to express more empathy in that sense when they
Mhm.
need, or even when they don't need it, just kind of to let them know, like, hey, I'm here. How would you do that? Or how would you express that?
Yeah. And I just want to like echo what you said, that I think, I talked about the people pleasing and like relying on external validation and not building your internal self in that way. However, we also heal and feel, safe in community and in support by other people. So we also do need that. We do need that external validation. We do need those people giving people in our life, showing us that love and support, and like having that be a community love type of thing,
Mhm.
to really heal and feel good. So it's not all about like you being on an island, like validating yourself all day long.
Right.
But you need both of it. You need to be able
Mhm.
to validate yourself, but that comes from also having the right people telling you the really supportive things too.
Mhm.
Um, oh, ways to show empathy. So I think again, I think just saying I am there for you, and saying like you can tell me anything, we can talk about this. I don't care how dark it is. I don't care, you know, how like this is not a burden on me. You can say that when you really care for someone and want to hold the space for them. But some things, I have kind of like a list of things that you can say that are good empathic statements. So you can say, I'm so glad you told me. Tell me more. I'm listening. You must really be hurting. It's okay to be honest. I'm here to help. This sounds really tough. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. I'm humbled that you shared this with me. Do you want to talk about it more? And then I love you no matter what. Those are some statements I
Yes.
recommend. Yeah.
As a little sensitive baby over here, I like that. The last one
Yeah.
for sure.
It felt good,
Yeah.
right? To hear
Yeah.
it.
I was like, "Ooh." Do you have any resources that you could let our listeners and viewers know about? So just readily have on hand.
Yeah. Yeah, so there is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, where I even tell people, even if you're not like in a place where you think you're going to end your life, but you're so overwhelmed by emotion and
Mm.
no one to talk to, this could be a good lifeline, a good hotline to call, available 24/7. You can just kind of talk through everything with a counselor on that line, and then they'll help you with next steps, help you de escalate from there, kind of with a plan going forward. And you can feel heard and feel supported, so it doesn't have to be at that like breaking point. It could be
Right.
just like all hours of the night and no one else is available. And
Hmm.
yeah.
Right.
So that's 1-800-273-8255. 1-800-273-8255. You can call. You can also text. It's 741-741. That's the number you text. And you can text HEAL, HEAL. I believe that's the recent thing to text. But if you text that number, that will be a text line. There's also, I'm just thinking about, Jonghyun and like resources also specific to the Asian community.
Mhm.
And there's, it's unfortunate because like I don't think there's so much out there, specific to those communities and also catering to certain language needs that way. But I did find Asian LifeNet 24-hour hotline where there's Cantonese, Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, Fujianese. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but
Mhm.
those languages are offered and it's
Mm.
also 24/7. Um, and that's 877-990-8585. And then the Asian Mental Health Collective is a website that has a bunch of resources on there. And then I would say Megan the Stallion also has a really good website of resources also for um, Black people, for BIPOC individuals. There's specific resources on there, as well as some of the main national ones that I mentioned. So yeah, I recommend her website for sure.
So I think we have been saying there are improvements being made in
Mhm.
entertainment
Yeah.
and in society in general.
Mhm.
But let's just kind of manifest a little bit. What would you like to see kind of in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of just the
Mhm.
growth in mental health in society?
Yeah. Yeah. In society, I think in this industry in general,
Mhm.
like I think it is on a good trend upwards in, that it is being destigmatized. More people are talking about it and more people are coming out about needing help, wanting help different ways. So like I think that needs to continue. I do think that there needs to just be more change from the mental health industry side of,
Mhm.
well, I think we need more support of just
Mhm.
um, what we were saying before, more money, more resources so that we can help more people. I think there also needs to be like peer mental health advocates, more of those people trained instead
Mhm.
of having to go through like all the requirements to become a licensed mental health therapist. There's other levels of mental health advocates and support that we can be
Mhm.
bringing on, and some
Mhm.
places have that, some states have that. Um, but yeah, more of that for sure. Uh, yeah, so I think just continuing to talk about it and also continuing to help people in your life, not being dismissive, like you said, just pray about it. I think religion does hold a really positive place for a lot of people in their healing, but just praying about it instead of also working through it in other ways and getting therapy support. And there's other ways that it could be dismissed as well. There's like a lot of toxic positivity, I'll say,
Oh,
in the
yeah.
field where it's just like, oh, just keep your chin up, just, pick yourself
Mm.
up by your bootstraps, just keep
Mhm.
going, you've got this. When it could be dismissive and you really just want to hear, like, you don't have to fix someone else's
Mm.
pain, but just being with them through it, that people want to just be heard, they want to be seen in the pain they're going through, know that they're not alone. Um, so more about that instead of just like, oh, you got this, keep moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Gosh, especially in rejection periods, people.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Juliette, for such an insightful discussion with
Yeah.
us. You are amazing. I'm so happy and I'm so proud of you as your friend for the past
Oh,
10 years now. Can you
oh,
believe it's been that long?
oh my God.
It's been amazing
Oh.
watching you grow and seeing you flourish. And so, if other people kind of want to get to know you better, follow your socials, give us the deets.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've loved being on this, and same here. I've been so proud watching you too. So thank you.
I love
But
this.
yeah, I have my therapy website, which is jbpsychotherapy.com. So J for Juliet, B for my last name blank, psychotherapy.com. On Instagram, I'm at therapy jules at therapy jules on Instagram. And then if you wanna check out my music too, my artist side, you could find me Juliette Chloe is like my artist name, but I'm on all the,
Ooh.
Spotify, Apple Music, all those platforms, just a few songs that I have out there. But that's like my own therapy. I still write music. I still do that. Um, I
Yes.
put that out there and I encourage others to. Wow.
Yes.
Of
Yes.
course.
And Juliet is a great karaoke partner as well. Next
Ah.
time you come,
Yeah.
I think we need to make that happen.
That'd be so
Well,
nice.
yeah.
Give you a big hug if you're into like physical touch. Oh my gosh, she deserves all the
Yes.
hugs.
Okay, here, I'm gonna hug both of you right now. So for cool hug.
And yes, viewers, this is a hug for you, and listeners, this is a hug for you. We're hugging you. Hug. But let us know your thoughts in the comments below, or message us at CCTV Pops on all social media. You can also join us on Patreon because we'd love to hear your thoughts, and you can help us decide our next episode topic. So if there's something like this you want us to talk about, we would love to hear your opinions and all the good ideas you have. So please give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. And for our listeners, give us a rating and a review on your podcast platform of choice. Until next time, that's Chris.
That's Shan, and that's Juliette.
And we are CCTV.